Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now! Never jam. Here comes the jam. Getting down with the truth. The only way he knows how to. Girls all up with his name. We call him the chief. You're damn right. He's gonna get that sucker. Yo, we track down the truth. You know what a track down the truth. You know and what they call him. We call him the chief. You're damn right we do.
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can follow us or watch the show every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on I'm not KGR, that's my other show. Let's see, on Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube. You can follow us on Rumble. They also show this on their Facebook page. Hey, listen, you can also follow me on Twitter. I have my handle is at LASD Jordan, and I post on a wide variety of things. And I am focusing on the California wildfires and digging into that. And I did a show a couple weeks ago on Briefing with the Chief over at KJDB.com, and their platform is Rumble. You can see it right there. There's my X handle. And I started digging into the policy issues that contributed to the fire. And it's shocking at the breakdowns and the failures. And it's kind of what we call an organized criticality. We organized our failure. We just needed one thing to throw us over the top, and suddenly all these bad decisions would come home to roost for us. And they did, I think, with the Palisades fire. And I'm digging into more information. I think I might do a show, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, where I break down all of the different policy decisions that likely contributed to the failures, and that might be worth watching. Now, my other show it's Briefing with the Chief, and it's on KJDB.com. You can find the podcast on Rumble, and I'm going to dig into that tomorrow. I'm going to actually talk about. I actually had somebody in my family who did a data analysis of the 25 urban areas that had Soros-funded DAs or progressive prosecutors, and then he wrote an article about it. We're going to go over that article about just how impactful, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania, these progressive prosecutors of Soros-funded DAs were in swinging the election towards Trump, and they were. I mean, the citizens were very frustrated. So, a lot of good stuff coming up on my other show, Briefing with the Chief, which is at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Rumble, KJR's Rumble, their Facebook page, and their Twitter feed. Now, on both shows, so this one we got, we're on YouTube and we're on Rumble, and I want to make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Rumble, and make sure you like the show. Now, today's show, we're going to do Patriots Day, which is it's something. Last week I did a show that it was a real life story, and it was Only the Brave, and we talked about the hey Penny, how are you? And we did it was about the Granite Mountain hotshots, and I didn't realize, but we had people who related to one of the guys who died on the sheriff's department, and I got connected with the father of one of the firefighters who passed away in that fire, and it was the largest death of firefighters since 9/11, and I think that happened in 2013. It was a good show, and I decided, hey, let me do another real life story. This one is Patriots Day that we're going to do today. And given that we had the attack in New Orleans, the terrorist attack in New Orleans, when you watch this movie, they didn't get really too much into the radicalization of the two suspects here, but they saw the practical applications. They saw how they were successful in their attack, that these two guys could have a dramatic impact on the safety and the psyche of safety within the city of Boston, and we saw that in New Orleans at the New Year's Eve festivals in New Orleans. So that's why I decided to do this show. But before I bring on my guests, I just want to remind you guys that at the Los Angeles Mission, they do great work. In fact, they got an event coming up in a couple of weeks. They're going to have a casino night. I think the former mayor is going to be there, and some celebrities are going to be there. Now, I tend to know all the old celebrities, so these are new celebrities I don't really know very well. Given that I'm doing a pop culture minefield show, I'm doing stuff on pop culture. I should know who they are, but I'm more into the old stuff. And so we're going to go and we're going to help support the LA Mission. Now, the LA Mission provides basic services for those in Skid Row who want that. But, there really is, it's kind of like it opens the door for greater treatment for the people who are willing to seek the treatment. Their goal is to give them wraparound services, 6 to 8 months in services. They have a faith-based element, which means they get no money from government. And they are incredibly impactful. And, to be quite frank, as I talked about public policies, and when we look at all the arsonists that are lighting fires in California or in Los Angeles when those winds were going on, many of them were transients, another word for homeless, and many of them had criminal records, which means, we had an opportunity to deal with them, but we had been suffering under the Soros-funded DA, George Gascon. And I believe that's part of the policy failure. People who are inclined to commit crimes like that commit other crimes, and when you don't enforce the law, they stay on the streets, and the likelihood that they would commit those crimes is even greater. In fact, LA City said 50% of the fires that they respond to, this was, I think, last year, were initiated by the homeless in some way. Either it was arson, or they were just trying to keep warm, or they were cooking food, and it led to a fire that the fire department had to respond to. So that's one of those policy issues that contributed to the failures here in LA. But we can deal with that by just giving to the Los Angeles Mission, who pulls people off the streets and reintegrates them back into society. Look at it, losangelesmission.org, and give what you can today. Okay, that's my lead-in for today, and let's bring on our guests, and we're going to bring on Sergeant Danny Coon first. And Danny, it's been a while since Danny's been on the show. He's got a bulletprooffirsтрesponders.com website you can go to, and that deals with about post-traumatic stress and suicide. So check it out. Hey, Danny, welcome to the show.
Morning, Chief. Thank you for having me.
And our next guest is Cliff Yates. Cliff's got his own show. It's the Cliff Yates Show. He's got his own podcast. He's also a retired sergeant for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, also a former stand-up comic, dabbled a little bit in the movies. Hey, Cliff, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm honored to be on with you guys. And Pat, you were the chief, and I did work for you, and you're the real deal. Danny Coon, we never worked together, but I'm so supportive of you and your continued service and trying to prevent first responder suicides and all you do. So I'm honored to be on with you in this movie. Really hit home to me when I saw it again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Cliff.
Yeah, it's I want to say the emotion of it. I when I watched the Granite Mountain Hotspots, I did the show last week, and Danny, I broke down on camera. We were talking about when the firefighters died, and I had the dad of one of the firefighters who had passed away on the show, and he says, well, the veterans took the outside and the rookies took the inside, and I didn't catch that in the show, and that just got me. Well, I go, hold on a minute, I gotta recover.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So they got in a safety pod, they got in their safety pods, and they get into a circle. And on the outside of the circle were all the veteran firefighters. On the inside were the rookies, but they all perished. It was really, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. God, I'm tearing up right now just thinking about it. If you've ever seen the movie, watch it. And I decided to do this movie because it is real life. It's mass casualty. It's when you have failure breakdowns like we had in Los Angeles, people died. 28 people died in Los Angeles. And when you have attacks, I think the attack in New Orleans is a prelude to others that are coming, in my opinion, because of the lack of focusing on external threats. We've been too busy, the Biden administration too busy chasing grandmas who, went on the Capitol lawn or were sitting down in front of abortion centers instead of dealing with people who were being radicalized and were intent on killing people. And I think we're going to pay for that, because that's going to take a while for Trump to turn that ship. And although he's doing a pretty good job in a week.
Yeah,
So,
amazing.
amazing. So, Danny, what'd you think of the movie?
This is the first time I saw it. I really loved it. It was an excellent movie. My next door neighbor is from Boston.
Oh, is he?
So when the event happened in real life, we talked about it for a while, and it just kind of, and then to see the movie, well, Mark Wahlberg, I love as an actor anyway. Mark back from his old rap days all the way up to where he's at now. He's just a really good actor, and to sort of follow his character, and although his character was fictional, because it was his character was a combination of several. I can't say that. Several people, but it was really cool, and like you said, there was a couple of spots in there where kind of set me back and had to think for a couple of seconds, put it on hold.
Yeah, absolutely. Cliff, what'd you think of the movie?
I'd seen it before, but I had forgotten all these hellacious things that happened. I forgot about that officer that got executed in his car. Yeah. I forgot about how this, adjacent Watertown Police Department got kind of drawn in and this major battle with the one guy. And so I'd forgotten a lot of that, even though I really paid attention when it was happening, because a couple of our people, Sergio Aloma, who's I don't know if he's a captain or what, he used to run in the Boston Marathon, and maybe he still does. I don't know if he was going on that race or not, but yeah, I mean, that was just, the radicalization of these two guys and what's kind of continuing on today, like you say, with the New Orleans, and we're not really paying attention to what's incoming, and that it's really, the movie really is so relevant to today. Yeah, so man, I'm glad you had me look at this movie, because I had forgotten some of the details and the hellacious things that occurred with these guys.
Yeah, maybe it'll inspire a show for you on the Cliff Yates.
Yes.
Want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the meat of the show?
Yeah, the show's been really gaining a lot, doing good. A lot of it's positivity, personal growth, but a lot of it too is paying attention to what's going on in today's world. And I think whoever you are in this country, and especially with Patriots, to be educated and engaged is so important for all of us now. And I think we've been kind of woken up to that reality, and so we need to pay attention to what's happening. And so my show is really delving into a lot of different things, kind of in a Renaissance way. And so thanks for always promoting my show, and I promote yours. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Patriot Day was released in 2016, and it's they call it an action crime thriller, but it is based upon the Boston Marathon bombing, which occurred just a few years earlier in 2013, and the subsequent manhunt. Now, they don't really get a whole lot in the radicalization of these guys. You have to actually read the analysis from the FBI or others to do that. But it's got a great cast. It's got Mark Wahlberg. Some of these guys are lefties, so I may not like them politically. Wahlberg's to the right, but Kevin Bacon's a little lefty. And John Goodman's in the show, and a reduced John Goodman. He's nice and trim, and J.K. Simmons, and so a lot of good people. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the movie a great deal. It was, it's hard to make a true story as dramatic as they did. But of course, some of the facts just kind of lend to that. I think when we get to the Watertown shootout and whatever battle is really what it was like. I had no idea at the breadth of actions that went there and what the guys had to do to take those guys out. But yeah, it's a great movie. Let's see, I've got to get the director here. The director where's the director? Peter Berg. Yeah, he's a pretty famous director, right, Cliff? He's a good guy.
He is. And I want to bring up something that came up in the movie that I had just recently. Well, I bought a book probably a year ago, and it's by Patrick Van Horn and Jason Riley. The foreword's by Stephen Pressfield, but James Mattis, he talked about this book. It's called Left of Bang. And if you remember, Kevin Bacon said in the movie, he goes, we have to go left of bang to look at what happened prior to this. And so the book has to deal with looking at things prior to an incident happening. So, yeah. So
and well, that's why, it's easy. Sometimes they call that Monday morning quarterbacking, but in reality, when you go back and look at politics, I guess I'll float this out there. One of the things I wanted to do is, so I'm going to expand your brains a little bit, guys. So there's a theory called the theory of the sand pile, right? Or you can call it the sand pile model, right? And what that means is it comes out of physics, but when you relate it to public policy, if you look at all of the public policy decisions made leading up to an event, and you can identify that there's, every time they make a public policy decision, it's like a grain of sand getting dropped onto a sand pile, right? And as you continue to make those, drop those grains of sands, particularly if you're not doing an overall analysis of the effects of each one of these different policy decisions, you get what they call a slide, right? And sometimes that slide can be catastrophic, like we saw in LA, right? And so if you look at California Air Resources Board and their decision not to allow prescribed burns, you look at CEQA, which strictly controlled prescribed burns and clearing a brush. You look at our water policy. As much as they say Trump's wrong, the bottom line is if you're able to water 3 or 4 days a week, your plants are more resilient to embers. Duh. Common sense, right? Another little piece of sand on the sand pile. And the crazy thing about it is this state has had a couple little slides that would indicate we got problems, we need to fix them. That would, I think, Waldensian paradise would be a little slide that said we got a big problem, we need to fix it. And they didn't fix them. They just keep, if you look at what's going on today, they just keep making stupid decision after stupid decisions. When the insurance company said, hey, we're leaving, they said, okay, well, we're going to put restriction. If you sell auto insurance here, you got to sell this, or you can't go for 90 days, or you got to give us notice. Instead of fixing the problem, they just put one more piece of sand on the sand pile to add to the cat, because eventually insurance company said we're out, and a bunch of these people lost their insurance just days before, contributing to the cost of those people and likely government to come in behind them. And so that's kind of the theory of the sand pile. As it relates to public policy, it's what they call self-organized criticality. That's what it. And I kind of see this happening with our approach to anti-terrorism, which is why I wanted to do this movie. So that's, if you get a chance to look that up, Cliff, it might be a good one for you to do on your show.
Oh, definitely. I like it.
So, but because I look at this, I mean, it's 2013, so we're what? That's 13 years or 12 years past 9/11, right? So we're ramped up. But sometimes we get a little complacent. And it's interesting in the movie, they do say one of these guys was on their radar.
And they missed it, yeah.
And they missed it. But, the guy in New Orleans, that wasn't on anybody's radar. So they see just how far, sometimes you can miss them, right? You can see the guy come. It's like how do they say it? It's when I was doing anti-terrorism, it says it's like, the terrorists only need to get one goal, but you have to stop every goal. Like if you think about the game of soccer, right? And so the terrorists only need to get lucky once, but you have to get lucky every single time to stop an event. And here, it's like when they say the guy was on our radar, it's like we knew he was a threat, we just didn't realize how much. And they were successful, so they got their goal right, and it was catastrophic for the city of Boston. But hey, let's roll the first scene and get some comments from our folks on that. Those are just Boston PD. So I'll tell this story just because I don't know if you guys ever been to Boston. I was going there to evaluate their transit system. That's when I was the chief, and I flew in during a nor'easter. So it's a couple different weather patterns that come in, made it incredibly cold and a lot of snow. And I was staying right in downtown Boston, not far from their main transportation hub. And they had this huge Boston cop out walking a footbeat in frickin' January during a nor'easter, and he's out there walking a footbeat. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I can't even get my deputies when it's 70 degrees out to walk a footbeat on a transit system. And this guy's out there walking a footbeat. And I thought, this guy's tough, And of course, I went out.
The first subway I was ever on was in Boston.
What was that?
The first subway I was ever on was in Boston.
Yeah, I just was surprised. So these are a tough and resilient crowd. Of course, I went and got a piece of Boston cream pie and a tea, locally, because it was at night. I didn't want to have coffee or anything too much. But yeah, I've been to Boston, I don't know, like 6 or 7 times. I love the city. I love the history. And certainly the Boston Marathon is an iconic event. So any comments regarding Boston PD and any experience with these guys and the Boston Marathon itself? Danny?
No, not really. Never had any contact with Boston PD. The Massachusetts State Police in the 70s, I think they were all like 6'5", and they were all tall, and they all wore riding boots. And you'd see these guys, and you just look up to them, and because they were big. But
Yeah.
other than the Boston Marathon being the oldest marathon in the United States, which is kind of cool, and that's what makes it so iconic. But then on that particular day that this happened, the Red Sox are playing. And,
Yeah, that was interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't remember that.
And I grew up a California Angel fan, so sports teams in Boston, I don't have a lot of love for them.
Cliff, any thoughts on Boston PD?
No, I don't have any connections with the PD or the marathon.
I did, I think, 3 presentations in Boston. Let's see, maybe it was 4. I kept getting invited back to speak, and it was for their transit folks. So it was the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority, and I think one transit cop got shot in this thing. And so I love the city, and I have to tell you, the gracious hosts spoiled us, free dinner, free drinks. Well, I can say it now. I'm retired now, right? And they just pampered us, and I just appreciated that we came out. And I always went back to speak because they always took care of me. The last time I spoke there, it was for a different crowd. It was people doing anti-recidivism stuff. They weren't quite as generous as the cops, but it was still a fun city to go to. In fact, I went to Cheers, the bar, one of those ones. I went to the Boston Museum of Arts, and they have all Revolutionary era art stuff. They had stuff with Paul Revere, as well as the Freedom Trail. If you've ever been the Freedom Trail, you walk it and it takes you by all the stuff. Like it'll take you by where the Boston Massacre occurred. It'll take you by the North Church, oneth by land, twoeth by sea. It'll take you to the State House where they announced that the Redcoats are coming and stuff like that. And, I was going by cemeteries. You see Franklin, you see the names, his parents, where they're buried. You saw his house. And for me, that's cool stuff because I love history. But I always have a positive experience of the Boston PD, and in the whole scheme of things, it's hard from a movie to say how did they respond to this tactically. I think they did as good a job as they could. And Mark Wahlberg here, he reminded me of his quick comebacks and his attitude, and I think he's from Massachusetts.
He's from the Boston area.
He's from the Boston area, and what was the movie with it was the Departed?
Yeah.
You remember that movie?
Yeah.
And come back, and he had the same kind of, he was able to embrace not quite as over the top as you saw in The Departed, but you saw a little bit of that character that he used in that movie come out in his character here. And
he really brings it out in Flight Risk. He kind of, yeah. That's not a bad movie.
That one that's out right now.
Yeah, the Mel Gibson directed. Yeah, I mean, it's not great, but it's his personality. He really exploits it. Yeah.
And they imply that he's obviously it's a compilation of characters, right? As Danny.
Yeah.
About, and because it's not one guy as a hero in this, and we need to say that when you successfully respond to an event like this, multiple people step up to get the best outcomes
that's
that
right.
you can get. And that appears to be, these guys are responding to chaos. And, the whole thing about disaster response, whether it's the firefighters on last week's show and this stuff is, Danny, you're trying to organize chaos, right? When you got a big event like this, right?
Yeah. And when those first bombs went off, I'm sitting there thinking, how would I handle this? What would I do? And all I'm saying is crap, because that's all you really can do. And then I'm thinking back and going, Pat Jordan would know what to do because he handled something similar to this with a train crash where, a whole bunch of people were injured. But you have to get through the chaos first.
Yeah, exactly.
You get through the first 5 or 10 minutes of the chaos and then start calming people down, obviously taking care of the injured and getting them treatment and everything like that, and then it'll slow down, but it slows down so slowly sometimes.
Yeah, some people, I think it got, one time it got equated to me once is particularly the train crash, and this would be similar to that. Oh, this was a little different because we had the manhunt. It's like an accordion. The accordion expands huge, and you're at the apex of the disaster, but eventually it's going to shrink back down just because, you know what I mean? And for the train crash like that, it's huge. With the fires, it's a little different. It's huge and it stays big for a long time, which then begins to exhaust your resources, right? And you start having some problems with disaster response. And in this case, this one switches from a big response challenge to a big investigative challenge, which is two different things, right, Cliff? So yeah, look, question to you, Danny. Danny kind of said it, right? What would you do? You're the sergeant on scene. You're Mark Wahlberg. It goes off. You're at charge, Cliff. What do you do?
Well, I like and what Danny said kind of makes sense, and what you said. So you kind of see that when he's reacting, right? Initially, when he just keeps repeating, we need more ambulances, we need more, and you can see him, he's scattered, looking around or assessing. And then eventually, right, he brings it back down to each individual victim where I can put a tourniquet here, right? And he starts to deal with one-on-one, and he kind of shuts out what's happening so that he can be effective where he's at. Yeah, I think you see that.
Well, we're going to have to back up a little. So our main character here, Mark Wahlberg, he's come back to work. He kicked some door, which I don't know why. Why is the older guy kicking the door, which they kind of show in the movie, right?
Yeah.
And he's got a bum knee already, and
it's implied that he was on some type of suspension or just
suspension. Yeah, yeah.
So he got caught dirty somewhere and was paying his dues. But because the first time I saw the movie, I watched it. I go, why aren't these guys helping him? These guys are like jerks. And then I watched it again last night, and I go, oh, that's right. They think he's suspended. They don't want to get into any of his trouble, his mess.
Right.
And
so
that's probably why he kicked the door.
The guy they took down had a nice look of a meth hype or whatever he was hooked on. Did you see the character that ran from him? In his underwear? I go, that's pretty cool. Realistic. Yeah. You're more worried about your next hit than what you look like, your appearance. That's actually pretty accurate.
Yeah, I like what the smoothie did to him.
Yeah, the smoothie. You mean the iron?
yeah, I like that. Yeah, that was pretty funny. And it's funny, they did weave in some comedy relief in this movie. But it's realistic. Hey, I'm doing this raid or whatever it is, and he's got to be up in 4 hours to work the marathon.
Parade,
and that happened. All of us. It's like big event, Rose Parade or whatever it is, and we've been drafted. A lot of people working patrol got drafted, right, to work the Rose Parade, or you foolishly volunteered, and you still have to do your regular shift. And I thought that was pretty realistic. Hey, I got to be up in 4 hours.
Yeah,
that was right on.
Yeah, that was.
Because I remember days like that.
Yeah, and think about it. You got maybe 3 hours sleep because you got to be up in 4 hours, right? And then this happens. Obviously you're dealing with a lot of stuff here. We both know this is, once the bomb goes off, that's a 16-hour day.
It's longer than that.
Probably, right? It depends on what position you have, right? But that's, if you act some really good people in charge, they recognize that you're out there for a long time and they could do some change, they manage that operational period. They call it an operational period. As soon as you get in charge, you're supposed to be thinking not only what you have to do now, but what do you have to do, what has to happen 8 hours from now or 12 hours from now. And I know that's what I had to do. Once you get hired, they force you to think about that. Let the tactical folks deal with the tactical stuff. Start thinking strategically what you need to do. And I think if there's any criticism of the latest fires, there might be some issues there on not thinking of the next operational period. I mean, I did that. I just went to the Reagan Library, and I managed Reagan's funeral, right? So when he laid in state here locally, I was told to write the security plan, and I did. And then 6 months later, he passed away, and so I executed the plan. And we were working in partnership with the Secret Service and Metro, right? Metro was the biggest transportation thing, and we transferred like 140,000 people in 40 hours. It was crazy. what we did. And at first, people, my boss didn't think of that big a deal. And he says, "Oh, that's no big deal. That's a dog of a thing." And then, 12 hours into it, it's national news, and I'm getting all these phone calls, and well, let us send now everybody wants to play. Let me just send you resources. And I had a good system going, but one of the things I did is I planned for my relief. So 12 hours into it, I got relieved. That was the plan. Everybody else didn't do that. They thought it would be over, And I come back, it's still going after, I'm now 24 hours. It's still going. And the same people from Metro and Secret Service are still there grinding it out. And I went home, I got a nice night's sleep. I came back, I'm nice and fresh. my team that was in charge came back, we're nice and fresh, and they're all melting down. But that's what you had to plan for those operational periods. And right above my desk here, I have a prayer card from the event, and I have a nice letter, a little prayer thing or a card sent by Nancy Reagan to me, and it's got the presidential seal on it.
Nice.
I have a poster of Ronnie. It's called in Remembrance. It's in honor of Operation Serenade, which is what it caused. And then I have a letter from Nancy, signed by Nancy, or maybe her auto pen or whatever it is, signed by her, that was sent to me. Those are the only things I really have on display in my office. And well, now this is my studio, so I'm starting to put a little more stuff up. But that's what I put up from day one, and that's kind of cool. But that you have to plan your operational period, and and I don't know if they did or didn't on this, but let's roll the clip, the terrorists, because we need to talk a little bit about those guys. And as I said, they really didn't get into the radicalization part of this. And I think these are two Tajiks. They came from Tajikistan, which is a satellite of the old Soviet Union. And the older brother traveled out of country, I want to say to Afghanistan, to get training.
I believe it was.
Yeah, to get training, and he was radicalized, and he came home and radicalized his younger brother, who was actually attending at Dartmouth, of all places, right? Really, my daughter applied, she didn't get it, but she's not a refugee, so. But he's here, and here he is. He's got his beard going, so he's got the whole look going, and they're watching the videos, which is what is happening. That's the danger of the web.
That's right.
And so here's our terrorist, and there's the wife. Now, the wife reminded me, you guys remember the attack out here in San Bernardino, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They attacked the Christmas party, and the wife was actually engaged in part of it, and she ended up dying in the shootout, I think with the sheriffs out there, right? But,
yeah.
But that wife was down with the cause, and so was this woman, as you find later in the film. But here's the thing about the internet, and this stuff was still happening then. They still want to attack, and they still want to attack us now. I had on my other show 2 CIA agents that fought it out in Benghazi, but they wrote a book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, and they laid out who truly did that, and it was Al-Qaeda, and the government, Hillary Clinton and others, didn't want to talk about it because they said Al-Qaeda, and Obama said Al-Qaeda has been defeated, but in reality, they set that up. That was planned. It wasn't about any stupid video that they said it was about. It was a planned attack, and that's why they wrote their book. And she's now consulting the Trump administration on aviation safety and security, because there's a threat out there of maybe suicide vests that's going on currently right now. But the Obama administration ignored those threats. Hillary Clinton ignored those threats. I just finished the book. Let's see, it's Sri Lanka, the Easter Sunday massacres. I actually have Dr. John Sullivan on. We're going to talk about that. And in that one, it lays out, and both those, they lay out the radicals involved. And that one is radicalization of moderate Muslims in Sri Lanka. And then they launched an attack that killed I think, hundreds. It was a vicious attack in 2019. So this stuff is still happening. These folks are still a threat, and they are a threat today in our country, which is why I really wanted to do the books. These guys existed. We let a bunch of people in. Trump just put a hold on a bunch of Afghanis, 30,000 of them in the pipeline. And in fact, J.D. Vance, I don't know if you saw a recent interview, J.D. Vance was getting beat up by some CNN reporter saying, well, they've been vetted. And he says, Not really. They were vetted by the Biden administration. I don't want those people in my country because clearly that vetting wasn't sufficient enough, right? So that's what I talk about: system breakdowns and failures, either through complicity, either because the government is complicit in the failure. I mean, they know that they're failing, but they're taking a risk, or they're clueless. I'm not sure. Actually, I think the government under Biden knew. But these are the things that happen. You get these people radicalized. It does happen. It's still happening, Danny. And we are still a threat. And here's one of the things. Our folks need to be ready. Local law enforcement needs to be ready. This is your chance to advocate for local law enforcement and investment in local law enforcement so we can respond effectively. That's what I see as one of the things coming out of this movie. What do you think?
Yeah, it is. I live in San Diego County, and we know that there are several secret cells here. We know that some of the guys from 9/11 and those cells were living and learning how to fly airplanes in San Diego County. So it's we're a little bit more aware of it. And thank God we have a sheriff down here that is defying the state and defying the board of supervisors and say it's my duty to deport these people and turn them over to the feds. So we're lucky on that behalf. And we're also lucky because we do know there's cells down here. So you're a little bit more aware of what's going on. Now, for the rest of the United States, I feel sorry for you. It's there's people out there. We don't know how many thousands on the watch list actually came across. So there's people out there radicalizing every day, and I don't think that the federal law enforcement that we had the last 4 years had any clue or even had the ability to investigate all these people coming across. Whereas now the federal law enforcement we're going to have in the future will be much better. Homeland Security investigations, instead of chasing drug runners, which is the DEA's job, they can go after terrorists now. And instead of doing a lot of the other things they can go after the people smuggling, the child smuggling, the human trafficking. So they should be able to open up a little bit more and let the DEA do the drug stuff, let the ATF do the bomb and the gun stuff instead of them, HSI, chasing everything around.
Yeah, I agree. They also need to make an investment in local law enforcement so local law enforcement can contribute in the identity of these folks and also so they can be responsive to any successful attacks as well.
Right.
Hey, Cliff, it's kind of the same question, same theme. We got to invest locally because here's the deal. The FBI, as we saw, are not going to be the first ones on the scene. It's going to be local law enforcement. We need to make sure whether it's the two main likely attack scenarios haven't really changed much in 20 years. It's small improvised explosive devices. We saw that in Spain, Madrid, when they were attacked. We saw that in England. We actually saw that in Russia. We saw that in train attacks in Mumbai and also the attacks in Mumbai. And that was also what happened in Sri Lanka. Small improvised explosive devices and active shooters. And that requires us to train and get ready for that kind of stuff, right? So we need to have some capacity at the street level so our folks can respond. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's kind of as highlighted in the movie because you see as big and well-funded as the Boston Police Department might be, this the confrontation as it occurred is in an adjacent small city police department, Watertown. And so you really need training across the board between small and large agencies because you never know where that confrontation is going to occur. And man, those guys were all their devices seemed to work. They were well done, and man, they used them and they knew how to ignite them and they used them and efficiently.
It would have been interesting to see how many of the cops had former military experience because they didn't back off. I mean, they're right there,
and I want to in support of what you just said, I have a podcast that I listen to. It's called Things Police See, and this guy's an active police officer in the New England area, and he has somebody on his podcast from the LAPD backgrounds, and he might have a connection with our department. But they were bringing up how the training with firearms and long rifles on the West Coast is so far ahead of the East Coast, and they may only train once or twice a year, and they go the West Coast when they talk to officers from the West Coast are so far advanced in how many times they get to train with long rifles.
Yeah, I think I want to say it's quarterly. You have to go do quarterly and shoot, and
Yeah.
you have to maintain a certain level of proficiency. And I think we have expanded a number of people who have the capabilities. Because I think I remember when I was doing it, we developed our team that had fully auto, but also they were. We had to evaluate what was right. It was the M4, the MP5 kind of devices, and both of them were actually right in certain scenarios. But there was a certain training regimen that they had to maintain, and we did that. But also, I think major crimes had that. There were several units that had some level of capability, and it had to maintain some level of proficiency. That was interesting. I actually had to do a paper. I was kind of in the doghouse for a while, and they asked me to do a paper on perishable skills and how to maintain perishable skills. Of course, I laid it out, and I got moved, and somebody cherry picked all my good ideas and implemented some of them. No credit, but that's okay. It helped, right? But one of the things about skills, they degrade over time, particularly shooting skills.
Yeah.
And and shooting skills was one of them. Let's do the next one. Planting the bombs. Oh, wait a minute. As we roll this, Fenway Park. Anybody been there? I've been there.
I haven't.
No.
Have you been there? No, haven't been there. Yeah, I when I was in Boston, I had to go visit all the different stuff, and I went over to Fenway Park just to see it, just to say I saw it. I saw it, and not really much of a baseball fan myself. I mean, I like when the World Series comes. That's always, because there's so much emotion to it. But other than that, not much of a baseball fan. So here we got our guys planting the bombs, and this one's tough. I mean, you guys have you guys both worked the Rose Parade?
No.
Oh, you're lucky.
I purposely tried to avoid it, and I was able to do it.
I worked night side once, and I hated it. It was cold and a bunch of drunks. It was crazy. And then I promoted, and I started getting dayside, and I go, oh, families, they wave with all their fingers. Everybody's nice. And I think I worked it like 4 or 5 times dayside. But I got to be in charge, too, so I wasn't on some fixed post. I get to move around a zone. But this is kind of what it is akin to, right? A lot of people, particularly at the end, stand around. Have you guys ever run a marathon?
No.
Yeah, I did that too. So, so everybody's kind of waiting at the end. Of course, not for me. I was by myself, but, that's why I ended up being single, right? So everybody's waiting at the end, and you're stacked up there because they want to cheer up their guy coming in, right? And you have people all along the course out there giving you water and all that stuff. But if you're going to hit on the whether it's the Rose Parade, you're going to hit it where it's at its apex, where you have the most people, where you can have the biggest impact. And that's what these guys do. And the interesting thing is how they're able to just walk through and just plant these devices and essentially go undetected because you're not in the crowd. And this is when I was doing the Rose Parade, we had people actually in the crowd not long after 9/11 watching, because a lot of the ones I was working was a lot closer to 9/11 than 2013. And so we had much more robust. And over time, you get complacent and you pull that stuff back because it gets expensive and you don't think you need it, right? But these guys were planning their packages, or they each had one, and they went in different directions and had an impact. So the fact that they were undetected and nobody was looking for the changes, it's hard, but nobody was looking for the difference on how they acted in comparison to anybody else. And so, Danny, that's really the part we need to get into. When you're looking for the bad guy, you're looking for the terrorist, you're looking for the guy that's acting differently than everybody else, right?
Correct. You just look for something out of the ordinary. Most of the people would be looking out at the or the runners and stuff, where these guys are looking more around behind them. They're kind of like, look for the guy that looks like a cop or is acting like a cop, because cops all look around and do different things. And that's what you want to, when you see a guy doing that, that's when you want to pay more attention to him, because he's not really paying attention to the race or to the parade or what the event. He's looking around where and what Thelonious is saying he's going to do.
And that's the part that becomes later when we do the detection. So you're exactly right. You need to be looking for how that person deviates to what's going on. You're right. If you're there to cheer people in, you're cheering. You're looking at the race. You're cheering. You're yelling at everybody else. You're not looking at the people around you, because they were afraid of being detected. That's exactly what they were looking for, right?
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether the guy's a burglar, a car thief, a bank robber. What do they look? They're not acting like everybody else. They're looking around to see if there's any cops around, if they're going to be defeated in their effort to rob the bank or steal the car, whatever. And that's what you saw these guys and how they acted. Here's one of them right here. And that's what cops are supposed to look for. But I don't know if Boston had people in the crowd looking for this stuff, but they clearly fulfilled their goal. And the reason why they're acting that way is because they want to be successful. That's the same thing as the criminal. They want to be successful. Theirs is they want to be successful in the terrorist attack. The criminal wants to be successful at getting away with this crime. Suspicious packages, Cliff. You were transit, right?
Yeah. That's one of the things that I guess could have been, someone could have brought that to someone's attention, that when the backpacks were left there. But I mean, you'd had, like you say, most people are concentrated on the race. So
yeah.
Probably you would assume that's the guy who's standing next to it's, backpack. But the damage that was done by those things, my God.
Yeah, there were pressure cooker bombs, but yeah, that's that whole see something, say something campaign, right? And
yeah,
package campaign. But that obviously you train your troops to look for that, but you also have to train the public to look for that. And I suspect that Boston was doing this, but how much of it did they do leading up to this event? Who knows? But you're right. If they leave the package, when I was the chief on transit, sometimes people would leave their packages, and the passenger would say, "Hey, you forgot your package."
Yeah, that's right.
Because they're worried. Hey, hey, what are you doing? This is yours, right? So people really paid attention, and they would call stuff in right away. And I'll tell this story just because it's interesting. I was in Israel, and we do this big response to suspicious packages, right? And I had to struggle with some folks to streamline their response because they were killing me. I'm trying to keep things moving, and they're locking. Well, we got to lock it down for 4 hours, get a cup of coffee, think about it, plan. And I'm like, shit, dude, they do it a lot differently in England and even in DC. What do you mean we got to streamline this stuff up? And I went to Israel. They got a suspicious package. Now, you know how it happens. We get half a dozen people around. They all get in there, talk, and I huddle. Okay, we're going to do this, break, go, and they go do it, right? One guy shows up on a suspicious package. One copper, right? He's got his SUV. He's got he's got a M16 slung over his shoulder. He looks at it. He gets a rope. He ties the rope on it. And he goes back behind his vehicle and he starts tugging on the rope to see if he can't get it to get open. Of course, nothing happens. And he tugs it until he finally gets a little bit, can see what's inside, and he sees it's not a bomb. That's it. That's how he did it. One guy. No protective gear, no big trucks, not 10 guys on overtime. One frickin' guy. To me, it was amazing. But, let's just say I had some resistance because I wanted to change those policies. Eventually they changed, but I got called a lot of names when I was trying to do that. But they're planning the bombs, and obviously see something, say something is the strategy. So these are things that I want to see come back in the United States, because I think when you saw with New Orleans, I think the threats that we face today, I got a book I got to read yet, Al Qaeda 2.0. I'm hoping to get into that, maybe get the author on my show. Is we need to re-embrace these strategies, because I don't think these threats have gone away. So mass casualties, let's see here. We got now they plant the bombs, and actually the bombs go off fairly quickly after they plant them, and they're pressure cooker bombs. So they use pressure cookers. Let's see, I'm trying to remember, and which had timers on them, right? You see, a pressure cooker has timer on it. They let it go, and then they had nails in the pressure cookers, and so when it explodes, it throws the shrapnel out. And if you saw a lot of the people who were injured, it was because it was down on the ground. It was their legs that were injured, right? A lot of injuries to the lower body parts. In fact, I think the one couple each lost a leg, or the
Yeah,
lady lost
that's right.
2 legs, and I think
Lady lost a leg, the male lost a leg. But in the movie, the younger brother said we should have put the bags higher.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the fatalities were people were sitting at the restaurant. I think there was a cafe, and they were sitting. So those were where the fatalities were, I think, because there was 2 locations, one right near the end, and one a little further down at a cafe that exploded. But so when this happens, one of the first things somebody should be doing is calling this a mass casualty incident. Danny, do you know? Are you up to explaining a mass casualty incident, what that means for folks?
A lot of people hurt.
Okay, well, how about you, Cliff? You want to take a stab at it, or should I jump on it? Right?
Jump on it.
All right.
You're the
Well,
expert, Pat. So.
Well, what happens is as soon as you get on the air and say, "Hey, we got a mass casualty incident, multiple people down," that's a clue to 2 different people. And you saw this happen here. You saw the fire. You didn't quite see it with the fire department, but you saw it with the hospitals. So
Right.
as soon as you say you got mass casualties and multiple people down, the fire department, they got a mindset. They're gonna have likely fatalities, and they're gonna have those people that are seriously injured. Are those that have died, those that are seriously injured and likely die, and then those that are treatable, so to speak, right? And they're going to focus, obviously, the people that are dead or dying, they're in the black. Unfortunately, you don't want to be on the black tarp. Then you got the red, and you kind of got yellow, right? And they break it down, and they triage. That's basically what they're doing. Well, at the same time, the second message is to the hospitals. So when you say you got a mass casualty incident, you got multiple fatalities, they notify the hospitals, and the hospitals, without waiting to hear the overall impact, begin to surge resources to their emergency rooms. They'll stop planned surgeries. They'll open up emergency rooms for that. And as soon as they start getting numbers in, people will start going in for treatment. So when you're on the streets and you're declaring, "Hey, I got a mass casualty incident. It looks like I might have 20 or 30 people down," immediately behind the scenes, as you do that, as the grunt on the ground, you're now mobilizing all of these resources to come in and respond in a particular way. So sorry I put you guys on a notice on that one. That was something.
The biggest mass casualty event I ever went to was like a shooting where 8 people were down. So
that's still a pretty good one, because you think, what city was it in?
East LA.
East LA. So what hospitals? So were you going to LA,
then
USC?
would have been SC, USC, and White Memorial, and probably East LA Doctors and Santa Marta.
And if you think about it, emergency room probably has enough to handle maybe 2 at most. Some of the biggest emergencies, maybe 2 severely injured folks, right? They get quickly overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, the old emergency room at LA County USC, I think they had spots for 4.
Right. Okay.
Or real bad hurt people.
Right.
And the new one, I think, is like double to triple the size, their new emergency room. But the old one, they had 4 beds for people who were going to die.
But that is because that isn't because they're waiting for the mass casualty incident. It's because they have a certain steady volume coming in.
Yeah, right.
And some of those beds are already filled, right? That's
right.
What we're kind of talking about, right? And so when people stop surgeries, expand capacity immediately because we got 20 victims, they're immediately thinking, okay, I got 2 beds available at County USC. I got 1 at White Memorial. I got 1 at this other one here. I got to expand capacity, or I got to quickly transport these folks to other hospitals who they're already talking to. Say, I got 2 open beds. Bring them here. We'll take care of them, kind of thing. And that's what's happening behind the scenes that most people don't know. Look, you guys learn something, right? Learn something every day, right?
All I know is when I got hit by a car in East LA in 1987 or 88, and Marty Rodriguez was making fun of me as I was laying in the street. You remember that from when Marty was on your show together?
Oh, Marty, really?
Yeah, Marty was there the night I got hit by a Ford F-150 pickup truck, and they loaded me up into the ambulance. And they were asking me what hospital I wanted to go to, and I was in no mood to even think about what hospital I went into.
The closest one.
And they go, SC's closed. White's closed. The only open hospital is Santa Marta. I go, I don't care. And next thing you know, we're taking a White. So White Memorial Day invented a bed or something for me when I got there. They go, a cop's coming in, a deputy's coming in. So
Yeah, and
we're
I
gonna,
have to
we're
say
gonna get
that
a space for you.
if you're a cop or a firefighter coming in, it's been my experience, they roll out, I don't want to say they roll out the red carpet, they're just ready to go.
Yeah.
And I went a couple times, unfortunately, to Cedars. Yeah, and they're a squared away hospital, and they always took care of us. Got the private room, didn't have to be with the dredges. But we do have a regular crowd coming in, so to speak. What's that? The Billy Joel song, the regular crowd coming in at our hospitals, and then we got to manage the capacity. You know, like, so the Chatsworth train crash was 25 dead and I think it was 45 seriously injured, right? And some of those people died en route, and so it took a lot of hospital. You know, I mean, 45 seriously injured. Jesus Christ, that, you know. And we were up in the top end of the San Fernando Valley. So I'm certainly, what's a hospital? What's one up there on Santa Cruz? I'm sure got some. I'm sure they got some. They were all over the place when we were trying to connect victims with families. Fortunately, LAPD took that mess on. That was a huge challenge, trying to reconnect everybody, and which is another thing. I mean, think about it. We don't even think about it. You got victims down there. I mean, you saw it with the girl, or whatever, the husband and wife who both lost their legs, and they had their kid there, and the kid got picked up and taken away, and they're both going in surgery, and they don't know where their kid's at. They don't know if their kid's alive or dead. They don't know what's going on with their kid. And fortunately, he wasn't seriously injured. But that reunification process is also a huge challenge. I think we got time for one more scene. Let's go. FBI, is this terrorism? And then we'll go for our break. Now, one of the things that happens, guys, is, you know, if you've worked with the feds, particularly the FBI, when the big event happens, you know, they're going to roll in and take it over, right? In this case, you saw a little bit of reticence on their part, you know, but this is a mess. This is really terrorism. And Kevin Bacon plays the FBI agent, and I think he does a pretty good job. You know, you can see that it isn't all about his career in this. He's from Boston. He's got the whole Boston accent going on, and as a character. And this is personal. You know, you can see it with all the cops. This is personal with them. And here he is, and they're doing the initial, you know, is it ours? Is it yours? Is it ours? Is it yours? And this is, of course, a big political mess for the mayor and the chief. You let this happen, as our mayor Karen Bass is figuring out, and their governor, you let this happen, right? That immediate blame goes to the people who are in charge, and in this case, it was obviously the mayor, the police chief of police, and of course the FBI, because they're the ones who are supposed to, you know, they're the goalies. They're supposed to stop this from happening. And it was interesting what he did is he went over towards the bomb site, he checked out, and it appeared like he saw the nuts and bolts or whatever it was that they had in the bombs, and he says, yes, this is terrorism. You know, he recognized the pattern and immediately took the handle, which I couldn't imagine them not, even if they didn't take the handle, they would be deeply involved in a unified command thing, supplying all the resources given the impact of this bomb. So what did you think of the character there, Cliff? Here he is picking up his little, you know.
Yeah, he played that FBI role really well. It's funny because that reminds, I know you've been through this a million times too at Universal, where because of the proximity of the jurisdictions, we would handle things. Then when something ugly happened, we would say, hey, LAPD, this main lot is yours. This kidnapping is yours. What? Well, we've never handled a case here. Well, you got this one because look at the map, right? And then we'd argue over it.
And we'd give it to them. And you know what? If it was a big enough case, they'd want the handle.
Oh, yeah. It depends on what it was, right? Yeah.
In New York, these guys they wanted the big collars, right? They didn't want to deal with the bull stuff, you know. Because I had a lot of NYPD guys on my show, and but they want the big collar, right? And
right.
I don't know. I saw some reticence on his part, Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Just jump in and say this is ours, because you get the whole package once you do that. You know, I mean, they're looking at them for their failure to stop this from happening.
Yeah.
What do you think, Danny? You know, you ever work with the FBI?
I took it as, you know, when the black SUV showed up, you're going, oh crap. Now we got to deal with these idiots.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, what you don't want is the FBI coming in or any Fed coming in and taking over your investigation. Obviously, they did. And what I got a kick out of is that the character Kevin Bacon played did not want to release information, did not want to go to the public. When, as locals, we know our city. We know this, and the Boston guys were right. This is our city. We know.
That's right.
Release the information because this is what's going to happen. And my wife and I discussed it, and we says, both of us, we said, that's one of the first things we're going to do is get these pictures out there, get the information out there to the people, because the people will talk to us. They may not talk to you because you're in a suit, but they'll talk to the real cops.
Well, you look at what happened with Luigi Mangione, right?
Yeah.
They released those pictures right away. He was caught, some guy in McDonald's said, hey, that looks like the guy from New York.
Yeah, that's right.
The Night Stalker. The Night
Classic
Stalker
example. Yeah.
Barely got off the bus.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And sees his picture on a newspaper, and a whole bunch of other people see him. And that's another good example of get the information out there as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Well, people.
What did he say,
bad
though?
guys are going to know. They're going to run. But
you remember what he said? He said, we don't want to put it out and say that we're saying it's Muslims.
Yeah.
If it's
right.
Not. That's right.
That's what he was worried about. And you can't worry about political correctness. You just got to roll with what you got, and the path is the path. It will take you where you need to go. So I think that if I saw any problem, now I did happen to interview an FBI agent who worked this. I wasn't the prime host. I was invited to talk to him, and he talked about how they did a fantastic job. He ended up being one of the whistleblowers, the FBI whistleblowers. He said, we switched from focusing on international terrorism to this domestic stuff, and it was outrageous. And he laid them out. The guy's name is George Hill, and and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing the show. The Islamic threat is still a threat to our country, and shifting all of our resources to J6ers or conservative Catholics or anti-abortion activists who don't, is bullshit. We need to look at everybody, and I think the Biden administration didn't do that for a long time, and now that threat has increased. And I'm not alone. Even the FBI director, before he stepped down, before Trump came in, said that. And now you got a whole bunch of FBI agents who've been too busy chasing grandma, who sat in front of the abortion clinic and doesn't have the skill sets necessary to go after terrorists like this, right? I mean, because you have to learn. You learn over time how they operate. And a lot of the people who say we need to focus on this were marginalized in the FBI. That's why I'm kind of happy with the disruptors that Trump is putting in there. They may not be the most experienced, but they understand that change needs to happen. And you can only do that with somebody who has the mindset of change. You can't do that with somebody who's embraced all the stuff that went on for 10 years because they feel like they have to defend what they did for 10 years. Does that make sense? You guys have worked for guys like that, right? I got to defend even though it was wrong, I got to defend what I did for 10 years. Instead of saying, you know what, instead of saying that was the wrong direction, let's switch gears. People who are invested in the institution have a hard time doing that. So bringing a disruptor from the outside who understands the institution but can make changes is really important. That's kind of how I see it. And I think the FBI needs to make some changes, although we'll get into after the break here, because right after this, we're going to go right to a break. Martina, if you're listening, and we'll give you a chance to use the facilities. But we'll get into how they set up a unified command for the investigative process, because I think people ought to hear how that happens too, and that it's a lot better now than it was before 9/11. And you see that cooperation, though with a little bit of chipping back and forth between Boston PD and FBI. I think we're ready for our break, Martine. Let's go to break, and I'll see you guys in 2 minutes.
Okay.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield, where they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then. There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We are reviewing the movie Patriots Day regarding the Boston bombing, marathon bombing. I just want to remind you folks to subscribe to the channel, Pop Culture Minefield, and make sure you like the show and share it with a friend. You can find us on Rumble and YouTube. And if you're going to Rumble, then you got to follow us over there. They got different terminology. So follow us on Rumble and subscribe on YouTube and just help us out. It helps us beat out the algorithm so that people start looking at our show. All right, guys. So a joint investigative task force, right? So what happens when you have a big event like that is people, so the FBI is in charge, but they get into a unified command situation with the locals. And in this case, it would include the state. And they would, you're getting leads in, right? Thousands of leads coming in. This is what happens when it's big. You get thousands, and most of them are bullshit. They're nothing. But everybody wants to help, and they call in with, yeah, my neighbor, he's been acting weird today. You ought to come looking out at him. And sometimes that's good, but about, 99 of them are not, right? And so you have investigative teams that go out and look at them. And what I liked, what I saw in the movie, because obviously I didn't read about the terrorism attacks, but my assumption is what they showed in the movie is fairly accurate. They laid out a large warehouse where they can kind of plot the bombing and what happened, but also that they have their investigative resources and they're managing their investigative task force. And where they're actually giving responsibilities, folks, and people are following it. And the nuts and bolts. So the nuts and bolts are, okay, Danny, you and your partner go check out this guy. Here's what we got, and then you go and you do that. Those missions are going on. Probably hundreds are going on during the course of the day, and as they get nuggets in, they're piecing those nuggets together to help solve the crime. In this case, it's driven largely by the cameras, which is Boston, New York, to some degree Chicago, not so much Los Angeles because we're so spread out. They have robust camera systems, or much more robust than Los Angeles. I mean, I pushed for cameras, but what most people don't know is along all of the train station, all of the train lines in Los Angeles is conduit. And when I was working as a chief, I encouraged them to lay extra fiber so that they could put in camera systems as well. I said, as part of your design, it's called design to build is what they do. So I was going to these meetings and I was pushing the capability of adding stuff later, because if you have to lay fiber after the fact, it's much more expensive. If you're laying it while you're building it, then you could add capabilities later. And they adopted that strategy. And so they laid a bunch of fiber. And what I was trying to get the region to think about, but I was competing against firefighters and LAPD and everybody, is if you look at the transit system, those transit systems could be hubs, in the spoke of a wheel, right? I mean, it could be the hub, and then you get all these different spokes going out, and that fiber could be, like what do they call the little? They go from the wheel to the hub. It's called the spoke, right?
Spoke,
yeah. It could be they could be the spoke, where you can put cameras in. But more importantly, many of them are close to some of our most sensitive regions. Like right now, the Expo line is very close to the Coliseum, right? And you got the Gold Line, which is not very far from the Rose Bowl. And you could link camera systems in that, and it can go to a centralized hub. You can have small decentralized hubs, and that's what I was trying to get them to think about, to replicate what they did in London. Of course, I lost out because it was expensive. But that capability is here in LA. It's just, getting people to see a vision sometimes is really hard because it means investing something now that they're not going to get use of right away, or one more fire truck, or one more special snazzy unit for the police is more important than the cameras. And we saw in this investigative process that the cameras were very important, right? Because they tracked them. So Danny, I wanted to talk a little bit about knowing your beat. So one of the things that Mark Wahlberg played a compilation of characters. He clearly wasn't the guy who came back and led them through the neighborhood and told them where the cameras are at. So if you're working a beat and you've been there for a few years, you're going to know who has cameras.
You have to know. I want to back up a little bit on this.
Go ahead.
When Kevin Bacon, when he goes, I think it was chief of police or the governor says, "What do you need?" And Kevin Bacon goes, a command post, a really big one. And I like that, because when you get into unified commands, there's basically going to be a couple of people in charge of everything, and then everybody has their own separate discipline. You got your public information guys on one side, you got your investigators over in one area, you got your computer dudes in another area. So everybody's going to be spread out in this big area. And then what they did in this movie is something similar to what the FAA does in a large airplane crash. Is they pick up all the pieces and they go to this huge warehouse and they lay it all out the way they found it. And when I kind of get a kick out of it, because knowing that Tommy Saunders was a fictional officer in the movie, Sergeant Tommy Saunders, and he would just come back from a suspension and was still on probation, as we say. His PPI hadn't cleared yet. And I'm kind of thinking he knew all the places on that street because they're all bars. So,
yeah.
That's probably why he knew that part
this
of
bar
town.
right across from the the Walmart, and it has a camera. I would like to think he probably knew him because he was doing investigative cases, and he knew where those cameras were at.
If you don't know your streets, if you don't know your beat, if you don't know when you're chasing some guy, doing 100 miles an hour down some residential street, chasing him in a pursuit, that the road's going to go off a cliff, at the end of the street, like in San Pedro or in East LA, you're just not good. You need to go back to work another job, not patrol, because you need to know your area.
Now they could have figured this out, the FBI, right? They could have figured it out, but they're pressed for time.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I got was, you were just talking about the video thing. I remember, when I was a detective, you'd get a robbery and we'd go out and start pulling video, or we'd have some high profile burglaries. We'd be with homicide on some of their stuff, and you would have to manually go to each business looking and finding, do you have video, and pulling video. And then most of the time you can't get the video because the guy doesn't either have the access to it or doesn't know how to get to it. So then you got to get someone from the high tech to come in.
Yeah.
And that's usually 2 or 3 days down the line to get them to come in with the right codecs to get to the video. And what was cool about this movie was it seemed like everybody was online. You could push a button and go right into these different bars or different businesses that had video.
Yeah.
I wish it was like that out here, because it saved you a lot of time.
They did try to organize that. That was going on when I was still doing some of that stuff, but it's hard because you don't have rights to it, and some people don't want to, because there's so those cameras many times for some businesses are to reduce liability, and they don't like just giving them away, right? And so, hey, let's roll the scene, surveillance cameras, Martine, and we'll continue to talk about it as we roll it. One of the other things they talk about is facial recognition. Does it work with facial recognition? So, they got an analyst and he's looking at all the video, right? And he sees the guy who, as we talked about earlier, he's acting different in the crowd, right, Cliff? He's the explosion's going on and he looks the other way. This is the white guy, right?
Yeah.
He's looking the other way. he's leaving, and as other people are concerned about what's going on, and this triggers the analyst going, oh, Contraire, hey, that's my keen police mind, or FBI mind, says that's different than everybody else. Let's follow him. And they begin to follow him, and this is where they ended up bringing Mark Wahlberg in to lay out where I know you're right here. Whiskey Steakhouse. Yeah, I'm just reaffirming what you're saying there, Danny Coon, because I think that's. But hey, so these, it's interesting. I think part of this was dramatization in the movie, that they show everything is online, because some of this stuff is digital, some of it is old school. It's I forget the name of it now. It's not digital, and so you have to have different systems to actually see them, and some of them have different frame speeds. I learned all this stuff when I was looking at putting in camera systems and using camera systems for investigation. Yeah, go ahead, Cliff.
Oh, you bring that up because that came up recently, right? With the bombs that were left behind during January 6th, right? And then some of the footage they were using was a camera speed that was so darn slow that it didn't make sense that they had it that slow, right? It was kind of interesting, but you triggered when people that are reviewing about, they haven't really addressed those. They had video around some of those that were left by Kamala's office door there, and the replay speed on it was so slow, it was very hard to see.
Well, think of it this way, because actually your vision works the same way. I don't know why I have all this useless information in my head, but I do. So your vision is like a series of snapshots, kind of like our show here.
Right.
A series of snapshots, and your experience, your schema, as you links it all together and tells the story, right? So it interprets the story. With surveillance cameras, it's very much the same way, and I'll clue you in on why it's that way, right? Is because as the film will see it in real time, the video will see it in real time, but the storage cost to tape record all of that and store it is huge. So what they'll do is they'll take snapshots of the video so that you have a pretty good idea what's going on, and then they'll store those snapshots, and then you can interpret it. And so you get, this frame by frame event of what happened.
Right.
And people will they'll expand, they'll slow down, or they'll expand the frame time, meaning they'll have, let's say it's 30 frames per minute, right, versus 60 frames per minute. That's because they're reduced. Now they've reduced the. So Danny's smiling at me. He goes, "How does this guy know all this shit?" So they reduced the they reduced the storage costs. That's why they do it, and so it's to save. Some bureaucrat somewhere said, we could save a little bit of money if we just, and that's why it happens. So once you
know that because you read my book.
Oh, is that right?
and you did some technical research on the camera you're using to use the video on this. So you're shooting in 24, 30, or 60 frames per second.
Yeah.
And when you see something, it usually takes just under 300 milliseconds for you to see it, and then for your brain to recognize what you saw. So that's pretty darn quick. Blink of an eye.
Yeah, it's actually, I first learned that stuff. I did read it in your book, but I first learned it from For Science, where they explained how that happens. But it also fit with it's a completely different reason. I think your body doesn't have the ability to just monitor. The snapshots helps it cope, right? And with the cameras, it's just an expense thing. How much you're going to spend to store it, because in California, if you take it, you got to store it for 5 years, and the expense gets huge. But Danny, our actor here, or Cliff, our actor here, he's walking through and he's saying, well, this location, that location, and of course he's got to add the dramatization. Oh, I'm not sure what's the name of that place. I don't know. He's being a good actor here. He's acting a little bit of cinema here, right? And he eventually says the Whiskey Steakhouse, and as he's doing this, he's walking backwards. So, and they're estimating the time it takes from to walk from one place to another, and they're looking at the cameras, and they finally get pictures of both of our guys. And these were the iconic pictures that I recall being released at the time. Eventually, they were released, right? And so that it is as basic as that sometimes when you're doing an investigation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who knows what they're available now. I don't know if you guys have been flying recently, but now they're really at the TSA, they're using facial recognition. Matter of fact, now the last time I went through, I guess because I've gone through a few flights, I didn't even have to show my passport. I just looked into the camera and they said, "You're good." And so they used facial recognition to confirm who I was.
Yeah, and the limitations on that is, well, first of all, the face has to be in the system, right? So they confirm
Right.
who you are.
That's what I was saying. All of a sudden, after I had gone through 5 or 6 flights, they said, "No, you're good."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to stand there. You have to take your hat off, and they have to get a good picture of you. So, and you can see that as they're following this guy. No, not good enough for facial recognition, and they're getting frustrated. It isn't perfect. Like, I mean, some shows like was it NCIC? They'll say, "Oh, facial, boom, one shot of the guy, and everybody knows who he is, right?" And there's all the limitations are out the window because you got to solve that crime in 60 minutes on TV, right? So, but in this one, they do express some of the realities. You don't have a good enough shot, and I think even back then, like they use facial recognition on the sheriff's department. I don't know if you guys know this, but they'll use it in relationship to booking photos.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to identify them that way. But that's a set photo in a controlled environment that the person's taking, and to match them up against other clean photos is probably the best way to say it. But you're right, Cliff. They're using it at the airport.
Yeah,
they need a clean shot of you.
Oh, definitely, verify,
to verify who you are. So I'm gonna have to grow a mustache and see if that works. I don't know. Throw them off and see what happens. Okay, listen. Release of the photo. Let the photo go. Let's roll that scene because I think it's an important part of this. And we saw fortunately, we have a great example, Luigi Mangione, the guy who committed the assassination in New York, and how quickly you can. I didn't really, other than the whole Muslim contact from the FBI, I really didn't understand their reticence for not letting it go. They didn't want people to think this is Muslims. I'm like, your job is to catch the guy. There's still a threat. There's likely bombs out there. What do you mean? Who cares? We'll figure that out later. And all the other common sense coppers are saying that, right? What are you talking about? To me, that just goes to show, because this was 2013, so this was under the Obama administration. This is, I think, the time that I really, really disliked him. I just tolerated him. I thought he was a very skilled politician. I didn't like any of his policies. When I decided I really didn't like him was when the Yazidis were being attacked by ISIS, and the men were boys were being killed, and the women were being raped and being sold into sexual slavery. And he got asked about that, and his comment was, "Well, you have to remember the Crusades." That's when I decided I really didn't like Obama. I thought, what a punk. What a punk. I don't want to say these guys are bad guys. I want to say remember the Crusades, which ignores history, because if you know history, it used to be a Christian area, and then the Muslims came in, it kicked everybody out, and then it was a Muslim area, and the Crusades were trying to recapture the holy city.
Taking it back.
Whether it's right or wrong, to pretend like the only bad people in history were the Crusaders, that's when I decided, because you know what, he knew history and he was trying to shape a narrative that projected some very evil people in a better light than they deserved to be projected. That's when I decided.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Danny, what do you think?
His policy is he refused to recognize ISIS as ISIS. He called it ISIL. And just by doing that, he made them a legitimate, or tried to make them a legitimate organization. He allowed, probably a couple million radical terrorists into the United States legally through Somalia and some of the other countries. And that's why we're having some of the problems now. And then his policies were, we're not going to go after Islam is like it was before. We're going to change the whole thought process on Islam, and because it's a religion of love, and they don't really want to kill us all. And that's what he was trying to get the mindset across. And he didn't want to upset Islam because their people were going out and blowing up bombs in Boston or wherever they did. And I think that was his whole policy, and that's how he had his FBI set up, that they didn't want to go after or demonize a certain religion or a certain race.
Well, they didn't want to demonize Islam, and you saw that
Yeah.
come out with Kevin Bacon's character, and so you can see the impacts. So what that means to me, I mean, he's a bureaucrat. Kevin Bacon, he plays a bureaucrat. He's thinking about his career, and he's trying to slow that roll. And that part I don't understand. He knows, and somehow, Cliff, somehow Fox News got this, and it got leaked.
Yeah, right.
somebody,
Yeah.
and Kevin Bacon was pissed off, and
Oh,
God
yeah.
knows, they don't really suggest who did it, but there's a lot of smirks on the face of the Boston coppers in the state, the state he's there in Massachusetts, and they're happy with the outcome, and the FBI is unhappy, and of course they're going to release it before.
Yeah, Bacon knew it was somebody local that did that. He just was so pissed. He was like, I'm going to hunt them down. And they were
Chief
like,
or the
"Oh."
governor, one of those two.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, all right, well, yeah, what are you going to do to me, right? Obstruction. We caught the
Yeah.
guy, I mean, and I have to say, I'm going to hunt you up, but that's a lot of theater. I think. I think.
Yeah.
He realized it was the right thing to do. I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, particularly if they're from the area. If you got an FBI guy who's not from the area, who maybe he's a West Coaster, now he's in Boston, and he's got the big command in Boston in his career. But a lot of the people gravitate to where FBI agents will try to gravitate to where they're originally from. I know I interviewed an FBI agent. He was one of the whistleblowers. He ended up on some reservation somewhere when he first graduated doing investigations, and he wanted to get closer to home. As he had finished growing up in the Atlanta area or Savannah area, and he managed to get to Florida before he had his problems with the FBI and quit and became a whistleblower. But he said, yeah, everybody's trying to gravitate to get closer to their extended family, right? Their family.
Yeah, of course.
And so I'm sure Kevin Bacon and a lot of his top-notch guys there had connections to the region, and and in the end, they want the right thing to happen. And he had to know that policy was bad, but he had to put on his theater too, though, right? Oh my God!
Yeah.
I'm gonna get him. That's a little bit of self-protection there. But you know what? I think in the end, he knew it was the right thing to do, and we saw that with Luigi Mangione. I mean, look how quickly they caught that guy, right?
Ooh, man.
Yeah, a national hero for the left, Luigi Mangione. I don't.
Unbelievable.
Get the pictures out there as soon as you can.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it invites two things. You get one, you're going to get, particularly if you got a clear picture, they're going to identify him. But you're going to get a lot of fake ones too. But that's okay. Eventually you're going to find out who the guy is, because somebody's going to see him. And they did that with the J6ers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did. So when there's an incentive, they do it. And but hey, those were Christians, so it was okay to do it to them, right? Let's see. I didn't use this this shot, but I do want to talk about it. And this was the murder of the Sean Collier. So we got to let's honor the copper who fell on this one. Sean was an MIT police officer, and he's working the area. So Boston has a collection of universities there. I mean, they have Harvard, they have Cambridge, I think, and then they have MIT, and Princeton is down in New Jersey. But I think they have 5 major universities in the city, right? And and in this case, they had their own police department. And he's sitting in his car. I'm not sure I couldn't tell if he was put on a post to watch something because of the event, or if that's just how they did it there at MIT. But he was, I guess, distracted by his radio transmission. At least that's what they portray. And then they snuck up on him, and with the goal of trying to steal his gun and shoot him. And then he fights, and then they execute him. And I think they still didn't get his gun. So, hey, Danny, any thoughts? Fallen police officers, and
that was one of the spots where I had to pause for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
But they did not get his gun. I'd like to know what kind of holster he had, because he put up a good fight. And what I liked about that is what they portrayed is that, first of all, it was the younger brother that shot him, and what kind of gun he had. I'm assuming that it was some type of pellet gun. Or maybe a small caliber .22, because throughout the movie he kept going, I want my gun, I want my gun. The older brother said no. and the older brother was the one that shot him with the 9mm.
Right.
So I'm thinking this is probably something to distract him or something, so the younger brother could get in and steal the gun. And the copper fought. He fought like he was the third monkey getting on the boat. He put up a good fight, and we've seen a lot of cops throughout the United States, get shot in the foot and end up dying. And this guy, he wasn't going to give up, and that's something that was built into your DNA when you become a police officer. But even after he was shot in the head with the 9mm by the older brother, he still fought a little bit, as much as he could.
Right.
And I think if that guy wouldn't have come walking out of the dorm that he was looking at or watching over, they would have successfully got his gun and any other type of gun that was in the car, because I'm sure he had a shotgun and probably a long rifle or two in there.
Well, he I forget what I forget what holster they call it, because they went to those type of holsters eventually after you left, Danny. Instead of the leather, they had these plastic ones where you can lock it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
He probably had a Glock, I think, because that was what was floating around at the time as the gun de jour, so to speak, for everybody, and it locked it in. But what did he do? He went right to his weapons retention training.
Yeah.
He went right, lock it in,
That's right.
hold it in there, and did the best he could. And unfortunately, Cliff, your thoughts on the scene there, right? This is a la Transit. We had this happen to a couple of our folks on Transit.
That's right. Just recently, and then before that, in circa 1992 or 3, I'm reminded of Steve Bellinger in Rolling Heights. There's no defense against that. He's writing a ticket. A gang member comes by on a skateboard, shoots Steve in the head. He does survive and fights his way back to work San Dimas Station for a few years. He ended up dying not that long ago related to those injuries, but that was just something that could not be. There's no defense against that if someone wants to do that. So that's certainly reminding me of that. Yeah.
Ambush, that's one of the most
Carson
dangerous
incident that you handled.
What was that?
That's similar to the Carson incident that you handled.
Yeah, it was definitely an ambush. Because the deputy didn't know what was coming, right? And so, and the guy knew what he wanted, but he wanted to die by police intervention. He was going to die there no matter what happened, and he did. So, I have the deputy on every now and then who took him out and 10-ringed him, and the guy was still up, trying to shoot somebody. So, yeah, you never know when it's going to happen, and it certainly tests your nerve, right? Well, there's a lot of good characters in this movie, but one of the ones that I really liked was the Chinese guy. I think he's Chinese, right?
Yeah, I loved him. I loved the guy.
Yeah, he's great. Let's show the carjacking scene. Let's roll right into this after Martine. And what I liked about is, first of all, he's not an American, right? He's communicating with his family, and hey, nice car, but when are you going to get a nice girl? Traditional, Chinese. Okay, the car's great, but when are you going to get a girl, right? When are you going to get a lady? When are you going to get married? I have a Chinese family that lives next to us. We're their nobody else here, so we're the aunt and uncle for their little kid, right? So it's fun, but they're very traditional, And this guy worked his tail off. He's got himself a nice Mercedes SUV, and these guys carjack him. They don't kill him right away, and they ask him, "Here's our guy right here," and they say, "We killed the cop," and they eventually say that we're the Boston Marathon bombers, and they of course think he's weak. This is what it comes off. That's what I think.
Yeah, hey, that's right.
Hey, awesome one. Hello. I think they think he's weak, and and eventually he gets his opportunity and he escapes. And they're testing him. Let us see your phone. Yeah. And they rob him. They take money out of him. And this is where they're really, we're going to intimidate this guy too. So these guys they're Adam Henrys to begin with, right? But now they're having fun intimidating the guy that they just kidnapped, but he was the linchpin who ended up solving all this, Danny.
Exactly.
The guy and so I really like this guy, and I don't know how much of it's true as we get into later in the scene what he actually does, but But yeah, he's just waiting his time. He's being smart. He's going along. He's being compliant, and he's waiting for his opportunity. But I really like this character. If this is everything in it happened, then God, I want to buy this guy a beer, right? What do you think of our carjacking victim here?
I like the guy too. He, if you go back to the scene where he's sitting in a pizza parlor with his girlfriend, he has this pizza and he's eating it and he goes, "It's hot." Well, for a couple of seconds, the camera pans over to another table, and at the table there was a Chinese guy. The Chinese guy sitting at that table was the actual real life victim.
Ah, okay.
I'm sure a lot of what happened from the carjacking scene to the gas station scene was the truth, or was pretty accurate.
Yeah, because at the end they show his picture, and so I'm sure that he really, gave details of what happened. Yeah.
And then when Mark Wahlberg asked him for if he had a GPS or something like that. No, I have Chinese American cousins and a Chinese or Japanese American nephews and nieces.
And he knew the locate number of that vehicle.
Yeah, and you go to them and you tell them, what's the number to this? They'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just something that they remember, that this kid remembered the number, and then you go, I get a kick out of Mark. How do you know that?
And he just looks at him.
I wouldn't even know that I had a GPS in the car.
What does it matter? How do I know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that maybe that's all. Yeah. That's I think that's
something that's in in the Asian community that they're really good with them. Well, my nieces.
I knew people. They knew their OnStar number, so they actually knew that number. Yeah.
Yeah.
I barely know my Social Security and employee number.
So they call it, even though he's probably not a citizen, they call this movie Patriots Day because everybody who had to pull together.
Yeah, that's right.
And this guy, and I just, he did say, "Hey, let me go. I have family. Let me go." And their response was, "Shut the fuck up." It's, just, why they kept him? I thought they've already killed so many people. He's lucky they didn't kill him right away. Maybe they just wanted to have 3 people, including an Asian guy, to throw off any coppers that might be hanging out. I don't know, but
they wanted to use that vehicle and didn't want that to get reported. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was one, and when you said he did come off that he was weak and would be an easy target, but something else he had was money, and I think these guys.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They got $800 out of him, and probably that was the max for the day. So if they keep him alive the following couple of hours, they can get another $800 out of him.
Right. And
I
just he's a great character. We did show some of the victim stuff going on here and people getting treated, and it was interesting. They at the end of the movie, I won't get into it, but a couple of our victims do end up running a marathon with their bladed legs too, right? And I haven't really touched a lot on the victim side of this thing because there really is so much to talk about. But once our guy escapes as they go on a chow run here, right? So the bad guys go to gas station. They're going to go to a chow run and eat all the junk food, get all the junk food. And our main bad guy isn't paying attention, thinking our guy is weak and doesn't plan, right? I really believe that. And that's what they, just the attitude they had. And you know what? To be quite frank, if that was a white dude, they might have killed him right away, right? They might have thought maybe he's more of a threat. And I'm not saying that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just their attitude towards him. Or even a black guy, right? Their attitude's more, he's just weak. We can do this.
Yeah, he's no threat to us. Yeah.
And of course, here's the one thing I didn't really. The conflict between, it's really weird. The conflict between the brothers. The older brother is in charge, and he treats the younger brother like he's a dummy, right? The kid's going to Dartmouth, not exactly a dumb kid. Of course, he's stupid to go along with his brother, but he treats him like he's a second-class citizen. Won't let him drive the car. Won't let him have a real gun. And at least initially, and that has played out. So that's probably true, right? I'm sure that the surviving brother talked about it. And
he must have. Yeah.
Right, and you see that dynamic. So he's clearly in charge. I have to tell you, he radicalized his brother and destroyed his brother's life. Now this is, if you guys have been paying attention to the Biden's pardons,
Yes.
right? He pardoned just about everybody on death row except for 3 people. The younger,
yeah, and he was one of them, right?
The
The Boston
Sarnoff
guy.
brothers was one of them. He did not pardon, and one of them was Dylan Roof, and another one was some guy that shot up a synagogue, I think. But he pardoned everybody else, and I was weeding through those pardons, and I'm going, man. Or they were commutations, so they stayed in prison for life, but at least their death penalty was commuted. But I looked at some of these guys have a kill count way higher than the Sarnoff kid, or even some Roof and these other. I mean, one was part of a crew that I think he killed 12 people, and he was from New Jersey, and they were running a narcotics crew, I want to say in Virginia, including kids. And he commuted their sentence. Crazy. It's one thing to say I'm against the death penalty, so we're gonna commute everybody's death penalty, but then to pick and choose, and then when you look in the backgrounds of the ones he decided to commute, it's like, holy smokes, Batman, what are you doing? I think one of the other reasons why they left him line is he's a foreigner, right? They see him as.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, because they would always make reference to in this country this. Yeah.
He's partly a kindred spirit with
right.
these guys.
Yeah.
Right. And but he does run away, right? And he gets away, and he tries to ask, hey, let me out, and they won't. Shut the hell up. But now we're coming up to the big scene as he gets Mark Wahlberg. So Mark Wahlberg, obviously, this is the composite character. He's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
and he goes and talks to this kid after the kid escapes, and he gets the information. And he puts the information out. So you can see they're asking him, what does he think of America, and he's playing it.
Yeah, that's right.
He's playing it safe, and yeah. So,
did you like the comments on 9/11?
Yeah, I did. I didn't catch him at first, but go ahead.
The older brother goes something to the effect that the government was the cause of 9/11, so Americans would hate Muslims. I just think of how many idiots in this country today still have that theory that it was the United States government and the Bush administration that had that. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't get 3 cops to agree on the same place to go eat, and you're thinking tens of thousands of government employees are going to conspire to do this.
Yeah, and that's the way. I mean, you investigated conspiracies, right, Danny? Right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's part of it's going to talk. Everybody who can get something out of a negotiation and get a shorter sentence.
Yeah.
There ain't nobody in you're going to have people talk in a conspiracy who have real knowledge and can point to the real players. Because you're right. It isn't just people who are saying, oh, they just wanted them to hate Muslims. It's right wingers saying it was the government. It's a lot of different people saying it was the government to do this. And it's like, I particularly after the last 4 years, yes, I think the government are capable of doing things that are wrong. And but to fly 2 planes into the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon, a 3rd one that's supposed to go to the Capitol. That's the one that got.
Yeah.
Let's roll. The passengers took it down in Pennsylvania. Come on. I mean, come on. And they're releasing the JFK, RFK, and MLK investigations. And I suspect a lot of the theories of conspiracies will be put to rest, or they'll just grow more, because now they release, oh, look at this. This just supports this. Yeah, I don't believe in the conspiracies because I just believe conspiracies with dozens of people means the facts are going to come out, right?
And even though the past administration's been living several conspiracies for the last 4 years, doesn't mean that in the next 6 months there's going to be a whole lot of people sitting their butts starting to get hot and they're going to start telling the truth. Well, you're already starting to see people step and say, "Oh no, I didn't have anything to do with that, but this is what happened."
Well, even that. So the conspiracy of Russian collusion, right?
Yeah.
So there was the conspiracy that Trump was involved in Russian collusion, but it really was a conspiracy to sell that politically, right? And then to use that to do an investigation. And even that, people who were deeply part of it ultimately rolled, right, during an investigation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Think about this. Google Maps now has said, for map users in the United States, we will map it as Gulf of America. And Google owns YouTube. We actually canceled Trump, took him off their platform. And now because he's made this, they're going to actually use Google Maps to say Gulf of America.
And they censored Adam Schiff. I mean, it was 3 investigations finally showed that conspiracy didn't exist, and it was actually conspiracy to undermine the Trump administration. His candidacy, and then the Trump administration. And a lot of those people, I think one guy got prosecuted, and all those people skated. And and they don't call that a coup, right? They don't call that interfering with
an election. Yeah.
That's just, here's the way I think it, and you guys can, we got to go. Let's get into Watertown. Never mind. I don't want to.
Okay, Watertown.
Let's roll Watertown. We got a couple more scenes we got to go here. So Watertown, what a shootout. Oh my God.
Wow.
Could you imagine you're the suburban agency, the big cities to the south or whatever, and you get word that they're in your area, and you see the guy, you see the vehicle, and they wait for you. How many times have you had that where they waited for you, right? And that's a different way when you're doing a traffic stop. They're inviting you in, which is exactly what they were doing.
Yep, that's right.
Or they just realize you're onto them and they just want to get it over with, right? Whatever it is. But none of it, in this case, given that these were carjackers, armed, likely the marathon bombers, the Boston Marathon bombers, this was not a good thing. and I think our coppers knew it was a trap, and so they were tentative about it. And of course, it was game on. I was not aware of the intensity of the shootout. So
me neither. I had forgotten that from the first time I saw it.
It was about 7 minutes long.
Yeah, it was
and
20 minutes. Yeah, 20. It went out for 20 minutes, I think, in real life. Yeah,
it kind of reminds me of back in the 80s when the FBI were hunting down these 2 bank robbers in Miami.
Yeah.
And that ended up in a shootout on a residential street. And these 2 guys took out a bunch of FBI agents and just had the best.
That's right. Yeah.
And it kind of, I'm watching the scene and I'm going, these guys, they're incredibly lucky that they didn't get shot,
Right.
And they got the drop on the cops before the cops actually got in position or got ready to do stuff. And I was built a correlation between the 2 because both of them were relatively short shootouts. And then I got a kick out of the sergeant from Watertown. I call him from Watertown. The old Sarge. He did what the old Sarges always do. And Cliff, you know this because you're an old Sarge too. He goes, "I'll flank him."
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah,
kind of gingerly walks.
Here's our guy. Yeah,
walks over, flanks a guy, starts shooting at him, and then it got real again.
He got real.
But that just reminds me because that's something all of us old Sarges would do.
Yeah, we would do. Yeah.
And what did he do? He shot under the car, skip shot.
Yeah, he got the guy in the leg. Yeah.
Because you look back to the the 95, 94 shooting in LA where the guys took over a bank.
Yep.
In the B of A in North Hollywood. Yeah.
With all the body armor they had on, one of the LAPD SWAT team guys who was in shorts.
Yeah, that's right.
Lays down on the ground and he starts taking them out of
skipping out the legs. Yeah.
And that worked. Or back in the mid 60s and 70s at the East LA riots, what SCB was doing is they're skipping birdshot off the asphalt into the legs of the protesters.
Yeah.
To get them to back off. Yeah. So he skip shot at the guy and took him out. But the guy, here's the thing when you talk about Miami, right? Because I just watched that, because it did remind me of that too. Is the bad guys had the mindset.
Yeah.
Right. They knew they were going to do this.
Right.
There was no hesitation, both in Miami and here. right? They knew what they were doing. They knew there was going to be a confrontation. They were going to go down. And here's the thing about the terrorists, and this is why they're so dangerous, is they're willing to die
Right.
for their cause.
That's right.
This is why they're dangerous, right? The guy in October in New Orleans, he was willing to die for his cause. He's a moderate Muslim. He got radicalized. He was a former soldier, made bombs that didn't work. He thought they were going to work, and he made some mistakes on them. But he was also armed, and he shot it out with the cops. He was prepared to die for his cause, and that's what you see for these guys. And that's where we're used to. I mean, even after the shooting starts, they're still trying to tell him to put down his gun, right?
Yeah.
Right. You see him do that, and then when this came on, it's welcome to Watertown. I enjoyed that. I don't know if that's true that he did that, but these guys are, hey, this is our town. We're you don't just get to roll into our town, and so this was really a very climactic scene for me. This was excellent. I didn't realize that they did actually have bombs that they were throwing at these guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah,
the damage that they showed
all
them.
about the bombs.
Yeah, it was amazing. And here you go. You got them yelling back and forth. and our sergeant did. It was interesting because I listened to an interview of that sergeant, our old desk sergeant, who on his way home rolled to the scene, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, we started walking towards each other and we're just shooting at each other. He says, thankfully, he didn't know how to shoot. So
yeah.
Then I just said, well, I'm just going to tackle this guy. And that's exactly. So what you saw in the movie, he actually did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, we got him on the ground. We were handcuffing him, and we see the Mercedes had broken out and now was running back towards them, and they got out of the way. And he said, yeah, that guy died because of my bullets and his brother running him over. So he said all of that was true. We had to get out of the way quickly so that we didn't get run over by the Mercedes. So I don't know. This is where I say, our guys have to be ready. And the one thing that you did see, and it didn't seem like it get deployed quickly, was one of the guys had a long rifle. He managed to get to it. And get a few shots downrange before another bomb came and discouraged the shots, right? But they did have AR-15, and this is our plug for. We do need to have long rifles in the field, right, Cliff?
That's right. And like you said, you alluded to a second ago, you got to be ready. You can't have a mindset, oh, I'm in the Sleepy Hollow of Watertown, or, this is not Boston. You got to have a mindset of survival that this could happen to you today.
Yeah.
Very
well,
true.
we're gonna right after this one, Martine, just roll into the boat bad guy 2.
Yeah.
And we'll skip the wife scene, but I will talk about the wife scene. So they did interview her, and she was, to my knowledge, she never gave any information up, but she was clearly involved. I don't know, and they don't indicate that they were able to make a case against her. And
I read later on that they did not make a case on her, and she has custody of her daughter.
Right. And they did make a case on the younger brother's roommates at
yeah, that's right. I think they're still in prison, huh?
Yeah, that they, obviously dumb. They should have just called in and says, I mean, I can't imagine, if I'm sitting in a roommate, I'm 20 years old. Hey, that looks like, hey, is that you? Ha ha ha. Is that you? I'm on the phone the next day, right? I'm not going to write a song and play another video game. It's like, or not the next day. I'm pick up the phone right now. Hey, I want to be anonymous, but hey, this is who that is.
Yeah, they were there to steal that boy's weed.
Yeah.
Since they had already said the younger brother was the largest dope dealer or weed dealer in Dartmouth.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be unusual. That he probably helped fund the attack by selling all that dope, which is not unusual. Right.
No, that's right.
That's why we got to shut down these
marijuana.
Here we go. Here's here's the boat scene, right? And this was I thought there's some funny scenes in this. They know he's there. Obviously, the owner of the boat finally comes out because they shut down the entire city. He sees that somebody's in his boat. Wahlberg goes up on it. He sees blood. He sees a person in there. He's pretty sure this is a suspect. And then, of course, the army comes. And it's like everybody in Massachusetts is coming.
Yeah, that's right.
And And they light up the boat, right? And the guy who ends up being the Boston chief of police, he's the senior. You see, he's got one guy who's got like 3 or 4 stars on it, 3 stars
Yeah,
on his thing.
4
He's
stars.
there with Wahlberg. He was there when all this stuff went down, and they shipped the boat. And I just love the scene. He says, "Well, I can tell you that boat ain't gonna float."
That was one of the funniest lines. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But they
As soon
light
as
this
they
boat
started
up.
shooting at the boat, I told my wife, Boston PD, that guy's getting a new boat.
Yeah, he's getting a new boat for sure.
And you know what? The guy probably said, "That's okay." He probably, "That's okay. Just take," that their attitude is way different than,
Yeah.
unfortunately some folks in LA here, they're going to, take that guy out, but this is what you call a contagious fire, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Not having control of this would be a nightmare. I've had to do that before where you have 50 people there and you say, "All right, you guys get to keep your guns out. The rest of you guys put your guns away and back up," and you have to do that. And I remember I was doing a briefing I won't say the station, and I was doing a briefing on contagious fire, and I didn't like how they were doing their felony stops. It became a half semicircle stop now, right? You know what I'm talking about? And instead of the 2 cars behind them, they're surrounded.
Everybody's
Why
flanking.
are you guys
Yeah.
doing that? That's you're inviting a contagious fire situation. You're inviting, well, you don't understand, Sarge, that we're at XYZ, and I won't say the station because I don't want it. But I said, what I understand is physics, and what I understand is bad tactics, and those are bad tactics, and you guys haven't explained to me why it's wrong. And I did that at a 6 o'clock briefing. The next briefing was standing room only for my kids.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah, they were going to try and intimidate me and tell them I was wrong. I said, "Oh, I'm glad you guys are all here, because we're going to go over what we should be doing, not what we are doing."
Oh, now we know what station it was.
You were talking about tactics.
I'm talking about
during
the
the shootout, the Watertown shootout, one transit officer, I think it was a transit officer, was shot and in his femoral artery.
Right.
And they put a tourniquet on. He was hit by friendly crossfire.
Yes.
Ah.
And that reminded me of a station I used to work at where I think they shot 100 and some odd.
Yes. That wasn't the station I was thinking of, but it's not far from there. Yeah. You get into this contagious fire situation, and but that's what I saw in the last scene. And it's interesting that they show that they end up getting the guy in custody, and there's a lot of drama to it. I don't know if all of this happened, but they finally bring in one team that's going to take him out. But you got this one copper on the top of the roof, this female copper, and she says, "I ain't leaving. This is my spot."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I like it.
Well, ma'am, welcome to the team.
Yeah.
It's going to get a little loud here. I don't give a,
Yeah.
I could, the sentiment is great. You understand it, but hey, you got to control the scene. And they do eventually take our guy down, and he gets convicted. But the Watertown shootout was really good, but I liked this scene too, because I can understand the passion and the emotion that all of these coppers had. You killed one of ours, you bombed our city, you killed one of ours, you shot it out with the Watertown cops. One guy's down, we're not, we're here to make sure you pay for that.
Yeah.
and they slow it down, and so it was a good and a fun scene. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah, it was. I really liked the female officer on there. That was just hilarious.
I ain't effing leaving.
And the whole thing with this whole movie is the way the cops talk. They must have had a really good technical advisor.
Yeah,
because they
very realistic.
They talk like cops. The language, everything.
Yeah. Well, obviously they didn't get the memo on cultural awareness and all this other stuff. We're much more guarded in what we say here on the West Coast, so we get to shoot more often with our long rifles, but they get to swear more often, right? So, Cliff, what do you think of the scene?
Yeah, I like that scene, and it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier, where we, when they were gonna, you say we look for people who look like, that are looking like cops, kind of checking their surroundings, and but this is what as citizens now, we need to do. We need to know our surroundings. We need to go into stores and look for exits, and we got to be self-aware now. You can't rely on the police. So it's really a lesson in a kind of a civilian academy kind of thing. We need to have these skills as just citizens, we need to be practicing these things. And like the homeowner did, he was paying attention to some details. Hey, that's my piece of foam off my boat cover. That's out of place. And so noticing things out of place is really kind of what triggered him to notice that.
But that's typical, right? If we got a containment going and the guy's still in the area, it's going to be one of the neighbors that
sees or hears something.
The guy's in my backyard. He's in my storage shed.
Yeah. How long? Yeah. How often did that happen? Man, all the time.
All the time, right? And you're able to narrow down, send a search team in, an arrest team in to take the guy out, and so that happens a lot. And you see it here. In terms of the overall movie, the fact that this is a true story, and they were obviously, you get the sense of emotion that goes along with it. Certainly, I didn't do the scene, but the couple that actually run the marathon, and then afterwards, I didn't really. It goes into what happened with some of the victims. They did little cameos and talk about what happened with their life and after this event, and which I thoroughly enjoyed. But this was, in terms of Hollywood, this was actually a really good movie. I enjoyed it.
A really good movie, yeah.
It was kind of strange enough, is in the Boston area and New England area in general, they had low ratings. And
did it really?
I think it was because the movie came out 3 years after the event. And
too close.
Too close. The town of Watertown did not allow them to use that street or their city in general in the movie, so they had to use another town.
Oh, wow!
And there was some weird stuff on the production side that they were allowed and not allowed to do in the Boston general area. So, but I was taken back by that. It got low reviews.
Obviously they show these guys in a positive light. I mean, out of failure, you had here a lot of heroes. One of the things that when I did the show last week, Only the Brave, the family really didn't want anybody making money off the death of their sons, right?
Yeah,
and so there's a lot of emotion about it. And one of the things they said is they wanted to make sure that it was portrayed correctly, that they weren't portrayed in a negative light. And there was some little negative stuff here and there that they had to portray, but for the most part, they felt like it honored the sacrifice of their folks. And I can see kind of the same thing, right? You don't want an over dramatization. You want a good solid telling of the story. And I can see where they might be a little worried about it, right? And the city fathers are afraid of how it's going to be portrayed. I get it. I guess I understand.
Overall, I think it was a very well done movie.
I do. This is obviously a different level, but I mean, when you're doing real life stories, trying to capture all these, because everybody's got a little story in this story, right? And I think one of that, it's the Black Hawk Down. All the soldiers had a little, their story was, all their little stories were part of a much bigger story, right? And some of them didn't even see each other during the battle, but every one of their stories helped make the full movie. And I kind of see when you do these real life stories, the dramatizations of these tragic events, it's a compilation of a bunch of small stories to make the bigger story is kind of how I see it. Do you see it that way, Danny?
Yeah, that's true. We did The Onion Field about 2 years ago, and that was the same thing. You had several little different parts of to make up the entire story, which was good. And this was the same way. The movie, another Mark Wahlberg movie, The Perfect Storm, was basically the same way. You had 8 or 9 different personalities in it. So it was the way Peter Berg directed this movie, and the writers. Well, Mark Wahlberg was one of the producers of the movie also.
Yeah. He probably bought it right away.
Yeah, the way they did it was really cool. And I want to flip a little bit. I really like what you said, Cliff, about everybody needs to pay attention where they're at, situational awareness. I live in a city where it's changing now, but a few years ago, then police chief wouldn't let license plate readers in any of their cop cars or anywhere. The city of San Diego, down, I think it's in Balboa Park, which is right on the beach, on Mission Beach or one of the beaches down there. They set up camera systems in street lamps, and they've been catching a lot of flack over it because of people thinking they're going to be violating their rights. Well, the city of Chula Vista is one of the few cities that use drone technology with cameras to do different stuff, and these are technologies that we have to embrace, because that's going to give law enforcement, that's going to give us that almost instantaneous access to information that we need. I can't think of maybe a handful of guys in 40 years that misused JDIC or being able to run on someone and misusing the information they get online, because basically a lot of the information you can get online anyway. So.
Yeah, the systems just make us more efficient. We are at the end of our show, guys, and I want to thank you for joining me here on Morning Coffee with the Chief. It was a great movie. Cliff, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
On YouTube, the Cliff Yates Show, and Danny Coon, get his book. Let's see, it's a Bulletproof First Responder.com.
Great book.
Check out his page. Thank you, Danny. Thank you guys for joining me on the show. Stick around for a quick debrief, and Martine, you can take it away.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.